Hello and welcome. Northstar here with another Northstar Talks Politics. Now, on this cold day of the year in February, I have a few things to talk about. First of all, I'm sure many of you have been distressed and focused on what's going on with the American presidency if you live in the United States, and for good reason. But as usual, like most things of any actual importance, it's surrounded by endless propaganda. Um, there's been an attempt to represent this as some sort of judgment on the economy, of course, that ignores issues like this. First of all, the death toll in Gaza. Many people refused to vote for Harris because she supported a genocide, and it is a genocide. I'm sure this will eventually get me attacked by some Hasbro trolls because they use AIs to detect anything they don't like, and if the channel is big enough, they harass endlessly anyone who speaks anything that the Israeli government does not like. That is an abuse of free speech, and what's more, it's an attempt to interfere in the politics of other countries. It's, of course, something that's done with the willing cooperation of the U.S. government, its intelligence agencies, who are very much, I mean, beholden to politicians who are beholden to groups like APAC. That is not any kind of condemnation of all Israelis, because the truth is, not only, I mean, it's often correctly emphasized that being Jewish and being Israeli are not synonymous, but being Israeli and being in support of the genocide aren't even synonymous. Is a small sliver of the Israeli population, maybe 14%, that is, again, wholeheartedly against the genocide. Upwards of 70%, unfortunately, of the population there supports it, and that's atrocious and evil and shows how deep the propaganda is around the country. And not all of them can be blamed for supporting it because some of them have been brainwashed or too young to know better, etc. But many of them can be. Um, it's a fascist state, Israel, and again, it's not synonymous with being Jewish. There are many principled Jewish people who have been beaten by police for protesting the genocide just the same as Muslims and Christians and everyone else, because anyone can stand for this, anyone can stand against it. In fact, one of the most atrocious groups that have supported it have been American evangelical Christians. Christians who are often more supportive of it than Israelis in some cases, which is insane but true. Not saying they all are, but that there have been particular individuals who've been fanatical in their support. Anyways, it's a genocide that may have killed close to 200,000 people. One of the things that's often done is people get the direct death tolls. How many people died to bombs? This Lancet article, which has become quite famous and controversial, published in the July 2024 issue of the Lancet, so it's already somewhat outdated. That is, the toll number should be higher. Estimates a conservative, that is, probably underestimating death toll of direct deaths of 37,396, and then further goes conservative with the estimate of indirect deaths. That is, when you bomb a country, you don't just kill people directly. If you bomb, say, a water treatment plant or a hospital, both things that the Israeli government has specifically targeted, you cause additional deaths through waterborne diseases, through lack of health care, and it's estimated that 4 times as many people have been killed through indirect deaths as direct deaths, leading to a death toll of at least 186,000. That was estimated in July. The violence continued after then, so probably upwards of 200,000 dead out of a population of 2,375,000. That is a large proportion of the population, inching towards 10%. It's like, I think it has here 7 to 9% of the population, but again, this was in July. The number has grown. So probably like 9% of the population dead. That's the beginnings of a genocide, a slow one, but when the population is continuously kept oppressed, continuously pushed out of the area, people do sometimes end up as refugees, even if the neighboring countries try to refuse to accept Palestinian refugees because they know that if Israeli government officials succeed in pushing all the Palestinians out, then they will come for the neighboring countries next. They will invade Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, and take land from them. They are not going to stop at their expansionism just when they have all of what the Israeli government currently considers Israel, which I would remind people who don't know includes areas like the Golan Heights, stolen from uh, northern neighbors of Israel, and they have made claims before on the Sinai in Egypt and on Jordan itself. So they will conquer their neighbors next, which is something that's often ignored. For you get trolls, oh, they won't accept them because Palestinians are dangerous, and no, it's because they know they're next if they allow Israel to finish its ethnic cleansing and genocide. So they are trying to slow it down to buy time. To hopefully the world comes around to their stance. Yet somehow the election was considered some sort of decision on the economy. Now, I would recommend if you ever get the chance to watch this video, the second thought video on the economy, but it goes through how GDP and GNP
against GDP
are both factors that are keeps turning on autoplay. You know, I'm just gonna get ads. It's called "The Economy Isn't What You Think."
GDP growth.
I don't want that playing. I recommend it. One of the things to keep in mind is the economy can be talked about many ways. It was pointed out that unemployment, God, disgusting ads, over sexualized nonsense. One of the, anyways, one of the things is that yes, unemployment was down, but at the same time, inflation had locked in high prices that weren't going away for a lot of people, which were crushing, and the prices need to come back down, which didn't happen. And the GDP may be up, but GDP includes military spending, which is something that video talks about. The original creator of the measure of GNP one of the original creators wanted military spending to be excluded from it because it creates the false impression the country that's spending lots of money in its military is a strong economy. If GNP or GDP is supposed to be a measure of the wealth of a country and the ability to provide for its people, you should not be including the ability to make things like tanks. That doesn't directly provide for the people of a country. And of course, there's two different numbers here: GNP, GDP. GDP is coming to common use because it covers over imperialism. Because if all the natural resources and industries in the country are owned by foreign corporations and all the profits get siphoned out, GNP is going to be much, much lower than GDP because the people in that country are kept in miserable poverty. But imperialists will prefer to use GDP as the number because it will cover over just how oppressed many people in the third world are. That's like in Africa and Asia, parts of Latin America, where a lot of natural resources have been stolen by the U.S. empire, essentially. Another thing here is this is not a ruling on women. Many people, including myself, who didn't vote for Harris, I live in a, for the record, not swing state, so my vote did not make any impact at all on who was elected. That's the quirks of electoral college. If people are going to defend the electoral college to the death, they're going to say that the electoral college is perfect, we don't need to change it. Well, then you have to accept that if I don't live in a swing state, I don't have to vote for one of the two parties, and you can go screw yourself if you think that you're going to bully me into saying you must vote for the lesser of two evils when my vote doesn't matter because I don't live in a swing state. Only in swing states doesn't matter. And the only way we're going to get rid of the two-party system is if people in non-swing states vote for third parties to the point that new states become swing states because there's so many third-party voters, and then it becomes feasible to seriously challenge the two-party system to demand an end to first past the post voting, to demand proportional representation, rank change to voting, but the way those two things can be combined, because say you do proportional representation for Congress, but state only has 4 representatives, you're still not going to get a seat for your party if you don't get at least 25% of the votes. Ranked choice voting then comes in so that a party with, say, 20% of the votes doesn't act as a spoiler for a party that's similar politics. Let's say the Green Party and the Democrats get 20 and 24% of the vote in a state with four representatives because it's a red state. Ranked choice voting can allow the Green Party people to put the Democrats as a second pick, and then you'll still get one seat who goes to the Democrats instead of zero to both because spoiler effect. So you can have both. You should have both. Um, and that's just named the Green Party. Personally, I voted for Claudia de la Cruz because um, this was not some kind of misogynist, anti-feminist thing. This was a rejection of genocidal monsters who rise to the top in our pretty vile capitalist system. I recommend this video as well, How Capitalism Destroys Feminism, also by Second Thought. That's enough from him, though. Because it's a rejection of this idea that someone can get away with genocide and supporting genocide and just being a vile human being just because they're female. No. If you're a bad person, you shouldn't be voted for. It doesn't matter what your gender is. If you're a good person, you stand for the right things, you should. Claudia de la Cruz stood for the right things. She was also a woman, by the way, but it was not because she was also a woman that I voted for her. It's because she stood against imperialism. She stood against the genocide in Gaza. She stood for nationalizing large corporations, which needs to be done if we're ever going to save our democracy in the United States, which I doubt these things will happen. I doubt democracy can be saved at this point. Um, I enjoyed John Oliver's Trump 2.0 bit as much as anyone, and that's what this video is. Trump 2.0 last week tonight with John Oliver. HBO puts up their videos a bit after the episodes on their service on YouTube. You can watch it. It's official. It's not violent copyrights. I recommend it, but rather than shoot clips from this, which you can see yourself, I recommend it. The jokes hit better that way. I will say I enjoy this as much as the next person, but even the comedy like this conveniently glosses over issues like Gaza. In fact, when he talks about Trump and how he ended up there, there's an emphasis on other things, and he focuses more on the damage Trump would do. He does end up coming to this musical, I would call it, this song a guy sings about how Trump is basically a fascist. Somebody sings that got big on TikTok, and then there were remixes. I found it particularly hard hitting that there's one of the guys who does the remix is wearing this like Jewish headpiece, right? So it's very on those, and maybe that serves as a mental reminder that Gaza was one of the things was involved here. And of course, Israel tries to falsely represent being Jewish and being Israeli is the same thing. They are not. There are many Jews who are against what's going on in Gaza. One of my best friends from college, Jewish, against it. There's many people all over the world. Well, this guy was my best friend from college, but I had another really close friend, so sometimes I say one of because I don't want to pick favorites. But yeah, so he's my favorite of all my friends. So, anyways, I'm getting beyond the point, other than to say, never once in these discussions do you hear mention of Gaza. We have an empire that's committing genocide, is supporting genocide, and we're not just talking Gaza. We're talking the Congo. We're talking uh, erasing past crimes like the British role in the Bengal famine, and nobody even mentions it. It's erased. That's what tells me there's no hope for our political system because we can't face these issues. And the only way we're ever going to save democracy is if we can have honest discussions about these things. And the media doesn't prevent people from discussing them. It's a channel democracy. Now, you know, I'm not subscribed to it because YouTube already tries to bombard me with too much of stuff, and some of it's just bad. Some of it I like, but some of it's just bad. Like liberal brain rot that completely ignores issues like wealth inequality or that the Democrats are a broken party and tries too much to just line people up to vote for the Democrats and support them blindly, and it bothers me. Sometimes yeah, it's like that, sometimes it's not. The host reminds me of some old unreformed hippies I met when I was at one point helping with the Sanders campaign. Briefly, I decided they were too disorganized, that they had much of a chance of winning, unfortunately. It's true. I did some political organizing for the Democrats at one point, and they were deeply corrupt. And I personally witnessed some corruption. Um, Sanders, I didn't see any corruption, but I saw a lot of disorganization. And I know the stuff is stereotyped. It's not like that in every state or every place. It was just what I personally saw. And anecdotal evidence is useless. What one person sees doesn't represent a whole party. But I'm not the only person who's seen these things, anyways. Um, but you have here what I thought was interesting. Let's see.
Seated out on the terrace was a man I recognized. He said, well, you have to assassinate Lumumba.
He used those words.
Yes.
About this video is about a kind of musical documentary, and it's about the Congo, the U.S. history coup there, attempts at resistance to imperialism.
But who ordered him?
Lumumba, by the way, tended towards socialism. And if you go a little bit later, I think it talks about something else.
Khrushchev was saying, I love you, but it was the interpreter who hated America.
I'm not sure that can necessarily be believed, that claim, but you see bits like this. Re-examining history, there's a famous Khrushchev banging his chair supposedly on his shoe on his desk and saying, I'll bury you, supposedly. I say supposedly because there's no photographs of this ever happening. There was one doctored photograph that ended up in Times. It was proven to be faked. And this was like, what, the 60s, 70s? It's not like we had Photoshop by then. So doctoring a photograph was harder than it is today, and yet someone did it. What he was actually doing was banging his fist on the table in that particular picture, and then someone doctored a shoe into his hand that wasn't there. The shoe that he did, there is a photograph of him sitting with a shoe on his desk. It's just not clear whether he actually banged it as a gavel. It's this famous symbolic thing, and whether he said, I will bury you or not, is apparently also controversial with some. This guy claiming that the interpreter misrepresented. I don't know, but I've seen few people disputing that, but it is heavily disputed by historians whether the shoe bang ever happened. You of course see biased. A lot of think tanks now, if you try and Google, will try and fill the internet with lies and propaganda, acting if it's just a fact. But when you get to sources, there are actual historians, not in think tank perils, and not like the Catholic News Monitor or whatever, which is another example of a biased source. When you get to the neutral, unbiased sources that quote historians, you can find experts talking about how there's no photographs of this. Most things at the UN were photographed. If this had actually happened, there definitely would have been photographs. So it probably didn't happen. It's probably apocryphal, and something that was just reported as true in the New York Times and other newspapers at the time, even without evidence. Example, Cold War propaganda and how the U.S. media doesn't always tell the truth. And of course, Khrushchev's whole personality was misrepresented because he was generally congenial and wanting peace and de-escalation, but sometimes he could get angry, and his angry episodes were misrepresented as being his whole personality when they were in fact very much a minority of his interactions with the West. The Soviets frequently argued for things like nuclear disarmament and a de-escalation of the Cold War, and the United States frequently escalated, but in the U.S. media, the whole narrative was reversed. And that's partly through the influence of the State Department, the CIA, and the media. That's partly just because the media has vested corporate interests in keeping socialism down and making the Soviet Union the bad guy. But yeah, that's that. And it's a bit of a brain dump here. I've got long COVID. It's sometimes difficult for me to focus, and even more difficult for me, even when I go in with a good plan on these episodes, to keep right on point. But it's things that need to be said, some of it. I hope viewers, you'll call into question some of the things you think you know. Um, I was really surprised to find out there was doubts of the Khrushchev shoe bang because I'd always accepted that as a fact. I'm someone who has deep doubts about whether the U.S. were really the good guys in the Cold War. There's a famous book that I mean to read, by the way, called "The Triumph of Evil." It postulates that the U.S. was the bad guy in the Cold War, presents arguments for that. It's at least worth considering. Um, and the fact the U.S. has been behind a capitalist system that has murdered countless people around the world. Also, by the way, if you look at a lot of discussions of Cold War, even when I was looking at stuff from the Khrushchev shooting, you see people say it was socialism versus democracy. No, it was socialism versus capitalism. Even that framing is an outright lie to claim it was socialism versus democracy when there were strong efforts to include as much democracy as possible in socialist systems, and the Soviet Union was unfortunately not very democratic, but some of the other countries and allied with them tried to include more democratic elements. Cuba eventually included more of those after the Soviet Union fell. And if it had been a more democratic nation in charge of the alliance system that was stood against the West, it may very well have been, or had been, I don't know, say the UK, which had led the socialist cause, say they had flipped communists, there may have been a lot more democracy and socialism. It was never a contest against democracy, it was a contest against capitalism. But by misrepresenting it as democracy, and democracy is something people like more, you can misconstrue history. And that's what's happened. But even as someone, anyways, with those doubts and those cynical views, I was surprised to learn that anyone debated the Khrushchev shooting and to learn that it's not actually a fact. It's just an apocryphal tale that probably didn't even occur. That should call anyone into thinking twice about the things you think you know about the past. Um, Until next time, though, hope you all do well. Take care of each other. Be kind to yourselves, viewers. Tune in for my other Northstar Talks politics videos or my game videos. I wish you all the best. Adieu, and may you always find a guiding star to lead you home.